Hello, welcome back to the Flow Arts Institute's Fire Safety Video Series. My name is Dr. Howard Chen, and I'm the Director of Safety for the Flow Arts Institute. This multi-part video deals with some of the practical safety training of fire performers, who are those individuals who perform artistically with live fire. Here's the complete roadmap to where we're going with this video. In general, we'll start by discussing the financial, legal, and ethical considerations that are common to all fire performers. Then, we'll take a more in-depth look at the considerations that a fire performer needs to keep in mind before ignition, around the ignition time, and also during the main part of the burn, and finally after the burn. We'll cover fire urgencies and emergencies, prop mishaps, extinguishing considerations, and even a bit about the medical care of burns. There's lots of information in this multi-part video, so pull up a chair, get comfortable, and let's get started. So here's the disclaimer. Before we start, I want to remind you that fire performance and the fire arts are inherently dangerous. Now, despite what we've talked about and what we will talk about, all the safety knowledge and practices in the world will only reduce, but certainly not remove entirely, your risk of serious injury to person or to property. In all likelihood, you, as a fire performer, just like every fire performer in the world, will get burned at some point, and possibly seriously. An old adage applies quite literally here. If you don't want to get burned, you really shouldn't be playing with fire. Now, all that being said, if you're still interested in practicing and performing with live fire, there are several very important things to keep in mind. So given what we've already learned, we can now begin to piece together the important elements of safety as it relates to fire performers. But before we get to personal safety, let's spend a bit of time on the financial and legal safety of you and your performance troupe. First and foremost, as a professional fire performer insurance is an essential component of your production and will often be required by the venues you perform at and the production companies that you'll work with. There are many insurance brokers and providers who can help you obtain low-cost but high-coverage insurance. And when selecting performers or troupe insurance, please make sure that it covers both bodily injury as well as property damage. Please see the end of this video or our website for references and web links. Also, if registration as a fire performer is mandatory in your jurisdiction, it's also essential that you follow the law. Carry these documents along with your government-issued ID, health insurance card, and business cards with you in your prop bag. So let's now turn to the ethical aspects of fire performance. The art of fire performance is a privilege that comes with amazing experiences and opportunities. However, practicing and performing the art also comes with a large amount of risk and responsibility. As such, it's recommended that all fire performers be cross-trained as fire safety personnel. The experience that you gain from watching other performers' safety successes and mistakes will be invaluable in understanding how to decrease the risks to your own body, to bystanders and individuals in the audience, and to the physical structures that are near to you. So in terms of your own physical condition, ensure that both your body and mind are prepared to perform with fire. There is no room for the use of mind-altering substances such as alcohol, prescription, or even illegal drugs before or during your performance or practice with fire. Keep in mind that the most important outcome of performance or practice is safety from start to end for everyone and every structure involved in the performance and in the audience. Towards those ends, pay close attention to the directions that the fire safety personnel, as well as the property owner and the professional fire authority, give to you in regards to safety. In almost all instances, and especially in performance situations, they're right in matters that pertain to safety. Now, let's turn our attention to pre-ignition considerations, the things to think about and check off your list while you're preparing for your practice or performance. Do this before you even soak your wicks in fuel, and certainly before you light them up. So let's go over this topic in the form of a checklist. Number 1, personal inspection. Here, I actually mean that you should take an inventory of your body and mind. Realistically, what are the current physical, mental, and emotion capabilities and limitations that you have? Have you taken care of yourself recently? Are you hungry, thirsty, stressed, sick, distracted, nervous, altered? Are you physically okay? And what about those old injuries that you have? Did you warm up all the body parts that you're going to use in this performance? Please remember, you'll be dealing with live fire, and the fire doesn't care if you're having an off day. If you're not ready to practice or perform with live fire, admit it to yourself and see what you can do about correcting the problems. Number 2 in our pre-ignition list, clothing inspection. What are you wearing? If you've had the opportunity to watch our video on fabric and clothing safety, you have a good idea of what I mean. In short, is your clothing sufficiently fire resistant for the practice or performance that you're about to do? Does it restrict your movement or obstruct your view? Are you wearing enough protective clothing and equipment, such as a close-fitting hat or gloves? And what's your footwear like? Are your pants too loose or too tight? Is your top going to come undone? What jewelry and accessories are you wearing? And does it provide a fire or entanglement or even a heat transfer danger? Number 3 in our pre-ignition list, hair and makeup inspection. Just like human skin and the materials that we previously talked about, any kind of hair, whether it's body hair, head hair, facial hair, extensions, weaves, and braids, can certainly catch fire or melt. Cosmetics and hair products have similar risks. Loose hair can get entangled in your performance props or burned by other performers. Have you tucked your hair into your hat or otherwise protected it by wetting it down? Burning hair smells just as bad as you remember, and cosmetic and hair product burns can be just as bad as synthetic fiber burns. Number 4 in our pre-ignition list, fire performance prop inspection. Now, many people practice with their props on a regular basis, but don't routinely inspect and maintain all the parts of the prop. So take the time prior to performing or practicing to inspect your prop. Quick links, screws, nuts and bolts should be tightened, loose wicking trimmed away, handles, swivels, and attachments inspected for wear. Structural instabilities should be repaired, not just taped over, and other parts maintained as needed. Remember that your prop is a mechanical device or tool, and that each one is subject to catastrophic failure at some point in its life cycle. So let's prevent that failure from being when it's actually lit, on stage, and out of control. For more information, we'll have a video dedicated to prop inspection and maintenance in the future. Number 5 in our pre-ignition list, other performer inspection. Often, you're not the only one on stage. The practice and performance of the fire arts often requires that there are other performers on stage, or at least in the same area, who are performing at the same time that you are, or just before or just after you. As you well know, when you're practicing or performing with live fire, anyone else's problems in the same area can quickly become your problems. For example, if a flaming prop is thrown in your direction, or your fire safety personnel are distracted and paying attention to other performers or artists, your level of safety can quickly become compromised. Take a note of the general condition of the people who will be sharing the spaces with you. What's their general preparedness, their level of health? And assess them in the same critical way that you've just assessed yourself and your props. On stage, and whenever you're practicing in a space with more than one person, a large amount of risk actually comes from other people. Number 6, and last on our pre-ignition list, venue inspection. What are the risks of the space that you're in? Are the ceilings high enough for your practice or performance routine? Is there any object that your prop can get entangled in? Are there doors which people could walk through unexpectedly? And what's the ventilation system like? Are there flammable areas or structures you need to avoid? And what about the floor? Is it or will it be slippery or sticky? And are there obstacles to step over like wires or cords? Anything that provides a trip hazard maybe? Now if you're outside, is there weather that could affect your performance? Now what about the visuals or sounds that could distract you? And can you fall off the stage? Finally, have an idea of the layout. Where will other performers be? Where are the entrances and exits? Where will your fire safety personnel be stationed? Where is the fueling taking place? Where is the spin-off area? Where will the audience be? And how many of them will there be, and will they be altered? So, as you can see, there's many factors that are worthy of your consideration on your pre-ignition checklist. Now, I've gone into quite a bit of detail in listing the subjects that you should consider, but I think that you can just keep the 6 points of inspection on your list. So, to summarize, the 6 important points of pre-ignition inspection would include personal inspection, clothing inspection, hair and makeup inspection, tool inspection, other person inspection, and finally, venue inspection. Now that we've spoken about your pre-ignition checklist, let's discuss the peri-ignition time. You know, that time just before, during, and after the fire performer has lit their wicks. We previously discussed considerations surrounding fuel dipping and spin-off in the fuel safety and reclamation video in this video series, so let's skip that topic for now. As you may know, the highest danger period in a fire performance occurs directly after ignition, just before you get into the swing of things, so to speak. Let's now list some of the factors leading to increasing danger at that time. Number 1, excess fuel. You very likely have too much fuel on your prop. Now, how do we define too much fuel? More fuel than necessary to complete the performance. If you're performing with choreography, most performers would prefer not to run out of fire before their choreography ends, thus they fuel up extra to make it happen that way. As you know, especially if you haven't spun out well, the extra fuel droplets can easily end up on the ground, or other people, and possibly on fire. Consider spinning slowly at the beginning of your set to minimize fuel spray, and next time maybe taking a bit less fuel. Number 2 on our list of peri-ignition considerations is excess fuel vapors. Remember how we spoke in the past about fuel vapors, especially those of naphtha, otherwise known as white gas or camp fuel, and the fumes of alcohol, and how they're easily ignitable? In a worst-case scenario, including poor ventilation or airflow combined with a very short distance to the fuel depot, it's certainly possible that flammable vapors from the fuel depot could ignite and travel back to the fuel depot. Now you've got fire, but in the wrong location. Sounds like trouble, and it is. So consider lighting your prop as far away from the fuel depot as possible. Number 3 on our list of peri-ignition considerations, excess adrenaline. Now whether you're a new performer or seasoned performer, up close and personal contact with the primal element of fire, as well as the prospect of an audience, choreography, and trying to keep yourself from getting burned, creates a situation of increased adrenaline for most performers. Now you know what I mean. You can almost feel your heart beating, your mouth is dry, you might feel a bit weak in the knees. Too much adrenaline makes your spin faster than intended and short circuits your brain. Consider taking a few deep breaths and a few extra seconds to clear your head, just before and maybe just after getting on stage. Number 4 on our list of peri-ignition considerations are prop changes. Now you've been practicing with practice prop for a while, and practicing with your fire prop unfueled and unlit. But here you are, stepping on stage with a fueled prop that has slightly different weight, balance, and air resistance because it's full of fuel and on fire. In addition, are you wearing gloves that you don't normally wear when you practice? And what other costume changes have you made? What about the grip on your prop? Is it slick with fuel or sweat? And now, do these changes make a difference in your performance? Certainly. Consider lowering your performance expectations just a bit if needed. Also, consider practicing in full costume with your fire performance prop fueled and lit. Number 5 on our list of peri-ignition considerations: environmental and venue changes. So whether you're practicing or performing with lit fire, you're generally moving from a poorly lit area to a better lit area. In addition, you're stepping on a surface which may have already been fouled by other performers, who have spun liquid fuel onto the ground. So lighting changes and slippery ground sounds like a setup for trouble. Consider being extra careful out there and not testing the limits of your movement or your choreography. So, let's have a summary. Just like in the pre-ignition checklist, there's certainly things that should run through your mind in the peri-ignition period. In the last section we talked in detail about each one of these points, so for now, let's just summarize the 5 bullet points that should be thought of during the peri-ignition period. Excess fuel vapors, excess adrenaline, prop changes, and finally, environmental and venue changes. As for the rest of your burn, after the peri-ignition period, it's quite easy to get distracted by the sound of the fire whooshing past your head, or to lose yourself in the flow of your movements and the music. However, there are still some important things to pay attention to. These include how your body is feeling, the feel of the prop in your hands, the whereabouts of the lit wicks of your prop, your location on stage, your footing, and the proximity of other performers and their props. Last but not least, keep listening for someone shouting about fire on your body or your hair. Now, while you'd expect that your fire safety personnel would be primarily responsible for your safety, there are other priorities, including ensuring the safety of the venue and the audience, may keep them from noticing fire on your person right away. Knowing that, it's important to remember that fire performers are primarily responsible for fire extinguishing on their own persons. Well, we're not quite done with the topic of fire performer safety training, but now's a good time to take a break, stretch, and keep this video length manageable. It's okay to rewind and review some of the most important talking points as well. So thanks for watching so far. There's more to come, so stay tuned. My name is Dr. Howard Chen with the Flow Arts Institute.